very disturbing TikTok trend in China. It feels painful to even describe it, but since I grew up there, I feel obligated to have a few words. So basically, a lot of people in China were filming themselves torturing these dolls that have dark skin. Not just any dolls, but specifically dolls with dark skin, which apparently sends a racist and sadistic message. It really pains me to talk about this. Maybe I could say something like not all Chinese, but it wouldn't mean much, because statistically, the Chinese population, including the immigrants outside China, are still in general pretty racist. There's no way to sugarcoat it. They just are. So I want to talk a little about why. Especially since most people in China never had a chance to see a black or brown person up close. Where does this behavior come from? First, I want to say, just as in any country, racism is always highly correlated with ignorance. You need to understand, contrary to what many people may have told you, most parts of China are still highly undereducated. Pile on me if you want, but it's true. I mean, their education is okay in terms of math and science, but when it comes to humanities and social sciences, it's like non-existent. Maybe some top universities have some decent programs, but high schools and local colleges are basically in the Stone Age. There's no empirical political science at all. No sociology, no human geography, maybe some geography, but not human geo. There's history, but the content is highly selective. Almost everything in the history textbooks has something to do with glorifying the Chinese Communist Party, not much else. Literature, barely. The reading assignments in high schools are very boring, except maybe a few ancient pieces, and very few translated articles from other countries. So basically, students are not supposed to understand people and societies. They're trained about everything else, but not human beings, because this way the ruling party has an easier time telling them what to do. And that ignorance also infected the Chinese immigrants in other countries because they're mostly STEM majors. They not only don't know social sciences, they kind of look down on social sciences. Some of them think political science is pseudoscience because, the data are not as neat as in a chemistry experiment. Well, that'd be another topic. But basically, ignorance in how the human world works is always a big risk factor for racism. The second explanation, the cult of money in China affects the psychology toward race. I mean, of course, Americans love money too, but compared to how much Chinese love money, you guys are like amateurs. China literally has a god called Caishen, which means god of money. I don't know any such god in other cultures, but Caishen is a big deal in China. It's actually worshipped by Chinese of different beliefs, like Buddhists, Taoists, and some other local paganists, even atheists. They all sort of worship the god of money. This money cult was especially explosive in the last half century because China was in this transition from the Maoist version of hungry communism to a net-breaking extreme of capitalism. So 2 generations of Chinese were basically rediscovering economic competition, and they just went crazy. There's not a family or friend gathering in China where people don't talk about money. So of course, race is also incorporated into that monetary value system. White people have more money, so they must be a higher race. About 20 years ago, my wife was having a business lunch with some white guys in Shanghai. And guess what? The receptionist of the restaurant tried to stop her from entering. He just basically asserted himself between the white guys and my wife and blocked her. She had no idea what was going on. Maybe the guy thought she was pretending to be a part of the group, or maybe he thought she was trying to hit on one of the white guys. But either way, you are not their bodyguards. Why do you care? Before she could figure out what happened, one of the white guys turned back and shouted at the receptionist and made him back off. like a tough colonizer in those movies. Pretty funny. And of course, that money-based racism affects Chinese people's attitude toward black people. They use race as a proxy to decide who can be a source of revenue. A lot of Chinese disrespect black people because they don't see a swell pocket. You can see this in the United States too, right? Even the most racist motherfuckers would pretend to be polite in front of rich black people, right? I bet you'll see a lot of crazy Chinese fans too if some NBA teams visit China. So part of racism is really just classism. Okay, my third point. Some of these racist video trends may have been the Chinese government's strategy. I don't have any evidence, but I know for sure that the CCP wants Chinese immigrants to be hated in America. Why? If they're hated, they'll feel more vulnerable and be more loyal to the motherland. They'll either go back or maybe help China achieve some policy goals in the US. So there's a very real possibility that the Chinese censors intentionally let those trends slip through their fingers to sow discord between Chinese immigrants and African Americans. The censorship in China is highly effective. With both AI and a massive team of online police, I just can't imagine anything the government doesn't like can become a trend. So on one hand, it's a reflection of organic racism. But on the other hand, it could also be assisted by a centralized algorithm. And of course, making Chinese Americans and African Americans hostile to each other will also help Trump. And China definitely wants Trump in power because China's foreign trade literally exploded under Trump's trade policy, as America is dumping its traditional partners. So China probably wants Trump to declare martial law and rule forever, So, of course, one way to make it happen is to make Chinese immigrants unable to stay in the liberal tent. Again, I can't prove it, but it's very hard to find alternative explanations for the censorship malfunctioning in the Doll case. Okay, the last point. Contrary to what you may have seen on Xiaohongshu, the Chinese population is deeply, deeply unhappy. And unhappy people tend to be racist, as you can probably see in the MAGA crowd. Unhappy people are desperate to vent on someone. Chinese people can't vent on the government because they don't want to go to jail, and they can't vent on white people either because it may cause diplomatic incidents and their accounts may get banned. So what do? They look for a target that will not get them in trouble. You might ask, why are Chinese people unhappy with all this booming economy? Well, I talked about it many times before, so I just repeat it very briefly. So one thing is the fierce competition. Most Chinese high schools don't release the kids until 10 p.m. How can you develop a happy personality with an adolescence like that? And competitiveness is partly a result of inequality. The pay gap between good jobs and bad jobs is just too crazy. Why do you think food delivery is so cheap in China? They pay the delivery man like nothing. I saw an American TikToker saying that her delivery man started crying just because she accidentally reported a late meal. Life is fucking hard there, guys. I talk about the hukou system, Google it. How 50 million children have to live away from their parents due to the public school enrollment policy against migrant workers. Look it up. And of course, the censorship. The absolute scarcity of good movies and good pop music due to censorship. I know you guys probably have a lot of complaint about America's streaming services. I do too. But imagine if they remove all the shows and movies that reflect societal ills and government corruption, and then remove all the LGBT content, all the childhood rebellions, all the shows about protests, labor disputes, women's rights, just all gone. How would you feel? That's the state of entertainment the Chinese people are living in, regardless of the GDP growth. So there's a shortage of stimulations, and those psychopathic black doll torturing videos are part of their desperate attempt at finding stimulations, the only type of stimulations that are still allowed. It's not an excuse, of course, but it's a psychological reality in a suffocating environment.